Fantastic. Okay, we're so glad to have you all with us this evening for effective subject leadership in primary languages. Hopefully this will be useful to any of those of you who obviously are new to subject leadership, who are existing subject leaders, or are subject teachers, but take on a leadership role because you are by default the only languages teacher in your school. So we want to talk about the importance of the role, some ways in which we can help you and support you with that, and how it can be really exciting, and obviously how we understand the challenges that come with that too. So for those of you who've been along, I can recognise quite a few names who've been along with us before. I'm Bethan, the Twinkl Languages product owner. I'm a former teacher, having taught French and Spanish from Key Stage through to Key Stage 5. And I work in a team of writers, editors, designers, and illustrators who all have a genuine love of language learning and of other cultures. We've all got a huge wealth of experience from teaching in many different settings at different age groups and different countries. And, you know, we have a real mix, a vibrant mix of people who are really passionate about language learning. So that's where we're coming from. And that's very much the expertise that we have behind us, really. So I've got one of my colleagues, Pete, here with me this evening, and he's got an amazing wealth of experience from teaching all around the world, so brings a really fantastic international and cultural dimension to our language team. And, you know, with everybody else, we have a huge range. So we've, you know, got an awful lot of expertise to share with you, really. So this evening, in terms of subject leadership, some of the areas I want to touch on are just some of the expectations at the start of the year, start of a new academic year, what expectations, how we can sort of plan for the year ahead. Looking at a subject leader file if you don't already have one, and what should be in it. Talking about pupil voice, talking on deep dives and inspections, CPD, championing languages, some key events that I think are absolutely critical to promote languages, and then just some top tips. Most of these areas are areas that we're also going to touch upon in future TeachMeets and CPD resources. So even though we may only look briefly at deep dives as part of this today, we will have a TeachMeet on deep dives, fully on that later on in the year. So, you know, there will be kind of sessions on all of those things. Plus, we're always looking to add to our CPD provisions. So we're constantly adding to that. So anything that you would like us to go into in more depth is always something that we can explore in future, or we have plans to. But this is obviously as part of the subject leader role tonight is the way that we're looking at it. So it's a new school year, although it feels, I think, you know, really everyone's ticking on closer to Christmas the way we're going. And I think judging by exhaustion levels, I don't think anyone's feeling very fresh at the moment. But you are still at that point that you can still decide how you're going to move languages forward in your school this year. So you might have areas to focus on that have come from things that were identified last year, that you might have identified yourselves, that might have been identified for you by senior teachers or by a previous subject leader. Or, you know, you might actually have to sit back and think, I need to use this session to go away and actually dig a bit deeper to find out what I need to focus on, because I'm not really sure what I need to do. So we really want to kind of get you feeling that, you know, you have some support with us, and, you know, that we have an idea really of how you're approaching things so that we can help you more as well and tailor our provision towards you. So I'd quite like you to pop in the chat, if you could, how long you've been a subject leader, those of you who are here. If you've been a subject leader for some time, if you're new to it, if you've been a subject leader for a while, and if MFL is your only subject, or if you are subject leader for another subject as well. I'd love to see your comments in the chat, just so we have an idea of who we've got with us this evening. So how long have you been a languages subject leader? And are languages your only area of focus, or are you a subject leader for something else as well? As is often the case with non-core subjects, they tend to get bunched together. I'd love it if you could pop that in the chat. That'd be super helpful. Any comments coming through? I know, Michelle, you're here already, and I'm not sure if you still are, but you were an IT leader as well, weren't you? An ICT leader. Okay, so only taken on in September this year. Handwriting leader as well. Languages and RE, so real mix, aren't they? You know, you can see already, yes, there are ways of overlapping. So taking over MFL this year, fantastic. So really exciting to see. Okay, so part-time and leading MFL for a while. Okay, so brilliant. So quite a mix in terms of what's that there. So that's quite exciting. And it's nice to see that when you have other subjects, if you have other ones, it's how you can find those links. Because if you've got another subject leader as well, if you've got another subject role as well, sometimes that means you can automatically find ways, because you're looking to save time for yourself by finding those links, and then you have those links to share. So PPA cover, okay, supporting primary colleagues, fantastic. Okay, so really exciting, you know, the variety that we've got this evening. So welcome everybody. We're really glad to have you with us, and really great to see such a mix of experience and expertise, and how we're all coming together. So really happy to have everybody here. So the most important things to think about, regardless of whether this is new or in line with anything else, is a secure knowledge of the curriculum. So we are, whether this is fortunate or not, the national curriculum has the 12 kind of key steps that you need to have. Matt's kindly sharing the programs of study there. And this is something that you always kind of need to have at hand. I've always got it bookmarked on my computer because I refer back to it constantly. Even though I almost know it off by heart, I'm still referring to it on a daily basis. But secure knowledge of that. You need to know how and when teachers are planning to deliver languages in their lessons. So it may well be, as some of you I can see already from what we've got here, if you're a part-time teacher, it may well be that you're just coming in just to do languages, which is very different because you have control over that. If you're the subject leader, but you have other teachers who are delivering your languages, it can be really useful to know, because it might be that it's always an afternoon slot, or it's always the same way, or it may well be that it's okay, it's just a sort of slightly more ad hoc, and it's just helping you to have a little bit more of control of that. And I think this goes the same for any non-core subject. It's always battling for that time, isn't it? And battling for the importance. So if you have other teachers within your school who are teaching your lessons, it's really important to know how and when they're going to plan to deliver their languages in the week, particularly if you want to do a learning walk, or you want to pop in just to observe, or just to see how things are going, or just to catch up on them. It's useful that you yourself know when those lessons are taking place. You really need to know what progression looks like. I talked about this in loads more detail in my last TeachMeet on assessment and retrieval practice in Key Stage 2, which is available within our Key Stage 2 section. We'll share the links for that later, where the recording is available there, and the reflections document. But really what I talked about there is progression. There isn't, you know, one size fits all. Can see already, just from your experiences putting in the chat, in terms of how your role as a subject leader takes place, is the fact that every school will have a different setup in terms of how languages are taught, whether that's a fixed amount of time every week, whether it's only 20 minutes, whether it's a block of time every term, whether it's an hour a week. It varies tremendously. And that therefore means that progress is going to look different in every school. So if you're new to your role in this school, but you've taught languages previously, you may well realize that you can't expect the same level of progress. It isn't like a GCSE at Key Stage 4 where everybody is expected to reach a certain benchmark. There isn't a clear kind of benchmark in terms of what that is. We're looking at progress, substantial progress in one subject, and you will need to determine that based on the nature of your setting, the cohort, and in terms of the time you have available to you. But the most important thing, and the thing I feel most passionate about, is within your role is to champion languages across the whole school. And that isn't just, you know, we're not saying we want to have everybody at a certain level. It's not just about that. It's actually just saying we really want people to love languages. I'm excited to see that we've got somebody supporting primary colleagues delivering transition lessons. I did a transition project a while ago for Year 6 children on French, ready to start Year 7 in secondary school. And I remember going into the school and saying, well, what do you want them to know? What's going to be helpful for you for your Year 7 curriculum? And they said, we just want them to come to us loving languages. And that was the most important thing. And I always say this, if you can inspire a love of languages in your children, no secondary school teacher, and I say this as an extremely experienced secondary school teacher, is going to be disappointed because they don't know how to count to 10, or because they don't know their pets, or because they don't know the months in French or Spanish or German. If a child arrives in front of me eager to learn and excited about language learning, That is the most important thing that you can do at primary school, is to get them ready for that. And as a subject leader, I think that is the single most important thing that you can do, is to generate a love of languages in general, whether that's celebrating home languages, celebrating all languages that are spoken in your school, celebrating culture, finding ways to celebrate all of those things. It really isn't just about that linear progression. Ooh, can you say the date in French? Can you say your birthday? It's far more important to me that you are imparting that love of languages and that your children are equipped with the skills they need ready for secondary school. So, how are languages taught in your school? I'd really love to know a little bit about how they're taught, in terms of how long are lessons? Is it every week? Is it taught by the same teacher? Is there one teacher who teaches all of the lessons, or do subject teachers, do normal class teachers teach languages, or is it that you have that you yourself as a subject lead teach the languages, and how long are your lessons are? I'd love to know that. So just got a little bit of that, really. Got a great comment in there that was saying, asked secondary school for liaison, but they're not very interested. I can well imagine that's a really tricky one, isn't it? Is trying to find that time for liaison. It seems to very much be only at the very end of year 6 when it's actually transition as part of cluster schools is often the case, and that can be really tricky, especially then, because in an ideal world you would want to teach your children in primary school the same language that they're going to be learning in year 7 when they get to secondary school, and you would want to be able to get them ready for the year 7 curriculum. But without that, you are left to kind of think, well, okay, where am I going then? And that can be really tricky, and I think that's really difficult. In that case, I always think the most important thing is to focus on their skills and their general language awareness and cultural appreciation, so you are preparing them for effective Key Stage 3 and beyond study, regardless of what the expectations of the secondary school are. Okay, so we've got here, this is interesting, 40 minutes a week taught by class teachers, only in Key Stage 2, 30 to 45 minutes. Okay, we've got a mix of weather teachers. Okay, mixed year groups, around 45 minutes a week, 30 to 60. Okay, so I think that's the most key thing, isn't it? This can be changed from half term to half term, or at the drop of a hat. I was teaching French as a sort of outreach in a primary school, and I went in one day to discover all the chairs and tables had been removed from the class. They had been taken for some sort of event that was going on in the hall, and it was decided that I didn't need chairs and tables, so I was trying to teach French without anything. And I think that's always the problem with languages, isn't it? So I think we always have to be quite creative as language teachers and go kind of beyond the curriculum and look at ways to impart a love of languages. In the end, I think we had a French disco instead, and we had lots of French songs and dance because it was kind of crazy. So 45 minutes by the class teacher, 45 minutes seems to be quite common, 45 minutes a fortnight. Okay, that's a really interesting one, but a real mix of people teaching it. Okay. Year 6 drop it all the time, focus on SATs, absolutely. And this is always the biggest problem, is how we deal with that when it's kind of variable, isn't it? And you'll find when it's things like it's the school fete, all the children are helping with the school fete, suddenly language is the ones that dropped off the curriculum. So it's kind of finding ways as a subject leader how you can embed languages, so even if you've missed your slot, how it can still be part of the week so that languages are not forgotten about. It doesn't just get relegated to Friday afternoon, half an hour of French. It's actually, we can do a little bit of French here, there and everywhere. And I think what's really interesting is I've been doing recently a lot of research into the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence, where they follow the European Union 1+2 model, where you pick up a language earlier at kind of reception equivalent and then a second language later on. But when they're picking up at the equivalent of reception age, it's very much about embedding it into routines, register, cross-curricular links, games, songs, those sorts of things. And by embedding it, it isn't necessarily part of a formal weekly lesson, but it becomes embedded. So that can be a really interesting kind of way. It may not be something that you can start immediately because you need to get your class teachers on board with it, but this can be something that you could do at a later stage, that you look to next year. This can be your kind of ambitious long-term plan, is that teachers in your school are embedding languages early on, not necessarily teaching to Key Stage 1 and EYFS, but just embedding it. So, For example, I live in Wales, and before, at a time before Welsh was compulsory, it was a case that registers were taken in Welsh, displays around the school were in Welsh. It's the same kind of thing to that, incorporating those sorts of things, having a languages assembly, getting that there. So that's kind of what I want to chat about. So yeah, this is absolutely it. So Dawn's just said there, when teachers don't teach it for several weeks, it's a daily 2-minute blast. That's a brilliant idea, but it's obviously so frustrating, isn't it? Especially when it's something that you're really passionate about or you have a responsibility for, and you are required to show some progress. And a lot of what we feel as though we're doing, as anybody working in a school, is working towards a deep dive or to an inspection or some sort of review or some sort of observation. And we always feel it's that kind of, I must keep a folder in order to be ready for when someone comes to ask me questions. And then it's really tricky, because if you're in a position there, as Dawn is just saying, that it's suddenly not taught for several weeks, but you are still responsible for that progress. Absolutely, I agree. It's a really great website to follow on social media. They're brilliant in Scotland. So the most important thing, well, one of the most important things to do is to have a subject leader file, or a great big box, or a tub. This is where you kind of need to start with. And I think the most important thing is that it is a working document. It's never complete. A subject leader file is something that you need loads of sections in it, and you need to be adding to it constantly. So, whether it's a subject leader drawer in a filing cabinet, or a lever arch folder that you've got loads of pockets in it ready, or several folders ready that you kind of store things in. This way, you've got everything that you can find, because you're going to amass things constantly. A languages policy is really important, and your school will obviously dictate a large element of that, but that policy would obviously encompass how often it's taught, when it's taught, who is teaching it, and those sorts of things, and the expectation then of where you're going to want your children to reach by the end of certain stages. You want to look at long and medium term planning as part of that, incorporating any schemes of work, resources that you use. For example, if you've got schemes of work from external providers, a monitoring and evaluation schedule, not just for the children's learning, but actually for the teaching and learning that's taking place, and then the evidence that you're collecting as you go along that. Obviously, it's really hard to do a book scrutiny or a learning walk or those sorts of things if, as Dawn said, people are not teaching your languages regularly, and you've got to then kind of jump in with little bits. But it's finding that way. Anecdotal evidence is just as useful in this stage as well, particularly in a non-core subject. And then in a way of logging staff meetings and CPD and that kind of thing. We've got 2 really helpful packs that I think are really useful. Matt's put the links in the chat. We've got a CPD pack on being an effective subject leader, and then another pack on assessment, recording and monitoring data, which contains a spreadsheet for logging progress. It's got all sorts of different ways. And if you're looking at assessment in more depth, as I said, the last TeachMeet was on assessment and retrieval practice, and we'll give you lots more ideas on how to record progress. And then we've got various tools to help you record progress in there as well. And the subject leader pack will help you set up that folder with, thinking about the intent, the implementation, thinking about your policies. So, what are the aims for MFL in my school? What are children going to achieve? What does teaching and learning look like in my school? What approaches are we going to take? It can be, if you're new to this and you're not a subject specialist, it can be really daunting to look at loads of different pedagogical approaches. And if you start following various people on Twitter or X, that can be really quite terrifying sometimes when you're thinking, I don't know what all of these things are. I think in the early days, that's something to build towards. Initially, you're looking at embedding this and getting more confident in languages yourself, and looking at curriculum coverage, and then you can explore different pedagogical approaches and how that's going to suit you. But really, supporting the planning of your teachers, supporting the progress, and supporting the assessment. That's the important thing. But even down to things like displays and stuff like that, and health and safety, obviously, as part of this, and what school regulations you might have about displays, that can be in your policy in terms of how often they need to be changed, for example. It's also really useful to carry out a resource and subject knowledge audit. I'm sure from the group that we've got here tonight, not all of you will have a background as a subject specialist. It's quite rare in primary schools to find someone who's got a languages specific background because you will have trained as a primary school teacher. It may well be that you studied a language to GCSE or A level yourself, and sometimes part of it at university, or you just have a general love of that country or of the culture and you've just kind of developed that yourself. But it can be really helpful to see what skills you have in your school, because that can really help decide things as well. It's really useful to keep a record of feedback, your marking policies, decisions that are made, all of those sorts of things, pupil attainment and progress, as I've mentioned, and also lessons and books. So whether you are monitoring these, and knowing what language learning looks like in your school. It may well be, we talked about recording things. It doesn't always have to be written in a book. It could be that you have done a recording of a speaking session, and that's your evidence of the progress that's being made. Or if children have done a little play or a song or a performance in French or Spanish or another language, that you've recorded that, and that's then your evidence at the end as well. So evidence doesn't always have to be something in a folder. That's why I'm sort of saying a great big box of all of these sorts of things is a great way to kind of go towards it, where you start to compile everything as much as you can. In terms of useful resources, we've got lots of things to help you. We've got, within our planning sections for French and Spanish, we've got whole school progression maps that will help you map out the national curriculum. We've got various planning and guidance documents that will help you plan a progressive curriculum and actually put it together with confidence that you are meeting the national curriculum. We've got knowledge organised, which are a fantastic way. They're fantastic for teachers who are non-specialists to have as kind of their own resource as well, but they're brilliant packs to have to help you guide and scaffold your knowledge throughout the year. So we've got fantastic knowledge organizer sections in French and Spanish as well, which is super useful. Brilliant. Michelle is using them for pre-teach resources, and that's fantastic as well. I think pre-teaching is always a really great idea, particularly really helpful if you have supporting TAs in your classroom as well. That can be really useful. And we do find that knowledge organisers, as well as that, they're quite nice stuck on the desk because they're always colourful and attractive. They also make really nice displays. So Matt will be sharing the links for those knowledge organisers as well. We've also got a range of assessment tests. So if you're looking for more formal assessment tests, this will be your decision based on school policies to kind of think, do you want to have summative end of unit assessments? Do you want to have formal end of year tests? Or are you looking at, a more low stakes testing? Whichever way you're approaching it, these tests, they don't have to be done as a test in silence. They could be done as worksheets, and they're great for just summarizing knowledge. So that collection is there. The knowledge organizers are fantastic for revising, for retrieval practice. And, within those sections as well, you'll also find different quizzes and various things for retrieval practice, which are brilliant. So as I said, if you look back at the reflections document for the retrieval practice and assessment session we did, we looked at loads of different ways for low stakes testing and starters and plenaries to embed all of those sorts of things and how you can use them. So I'd like to know really if you've got a subject file or a subject box or a subject folder in your computer already, what have you got in there? Is there anything else that you feel should be in your subject file that you don't have, that I've not mentioned, that you feel needs to be in there? Is there anything that you feel is missing? It can be absolutely brilliant to have, all these sorts of things, but it's constantly a working document in the way that a scheme of work, when you print it, it's never finalized, is it? Because you add to it constantly and change. And this is something that you should be constantly adding to and looking to add to it. So, if you don't have a subject leader file yet, my strong recommendation is that you start putting one together, effectively as your own evidence portfolio as much as anything. A subject leader portfolio is a great thing to be gathering. But if you've got any ideas of anything else that you feel should be in one of those that you'd really like to see or you'd like to share with anybody, we'd absolutely love. School development plan, fantastic, highlighting specific areas. Some schools have a lesson sequencing document. So you mean like a more specific scheme of work? So to follow things through, that can be really helpful. It can be great, whether they're just planning overviews or those sorts of things, depending on what's there. I guess it very much depends on how much as a subject leader you are scaffolding the rest of your school. It may well be that you are scaffolding the lessons and the lesson sequencing for everybody else in your school, the class teachers who are teaching it, or you are the specialist coming in yourself and delivering it, in which case the folder is something that you might keep for yourself, and you would kind of take that whichever setting you might go to. That can be really helpful, but certainly it's a good place to keep a copy of the national curriculum document, any sort of up-to-date Ofsted subject reviews or any of those sorts of things, anything that's there, cross-curricular links, absolutely fantastic. Our pupil voice, I'm coming on to that one in a second. Any reports or inspections, anything that you've got there, brilliant. And effectively that you just keep it as a constant sort of portfolio that you're just adding things to constantly, really, that you've just got links, or if you see a useful, it can just be as well as anything that you just have a spreadsheet and you just keep links in there. Fantastic. A large cupboard with files for each year, box files for the plans and resources. That sounds perfect. Yeah, it very much depends on the storage space. If you've got your own classroom, it becomes a lot easier to do these sorts of things. If you don't, you're constantly kind of carrying things around. We become I remember teaching in a school where I taught in lots of different classrooms, and I resisted all year because lots of my colleagues had little wheelie bags, and I thought, I'm not going down the wheelie bag, but I was the teacher with a great big box every time I went anywhere. But certainly storage space. So if you don't have your own storage space, it can be really helpful to ask if there's somewhere in your school that you can kind of store these things. And Michelle mentioned their pupil voice, and this is critical. In fact, the new Irish curriculum, which is coming in from 2025, there's a really strong emphasis on pupil voice as part of that. And I think it's really important wherever we're teaching that we look at what our neighbouring countries are also doing. So it's really helpful in England to look at Wales, to look at Ireland, to look at Scotland, and to see how they are planning their own curriculum. I think the Scottish curriculum for excellence is really, really interesting. I sort of did a lot of research into that recently, and I would really recommend that, if you get the time, you have a look at that, because it's really interesting to see how the lessons are structured and how the expectations that effectively we're asking our children to be at the same place, but there's just perhaps a little bit more scaffolding in the terms of the 12 national curriculum objectives. There are a lot more expectations and outcomes, but certainly in all cases, a view on pupil voice is really important. So this is your chance to get some honest feedback about your curriculum. And as a subject leader, it's really useful to get some time to do this, really. And looking through work with children can be really powerful, and it's really helpful. And I think, there've been so many huge strides towards this, really, that it used to be, I mean, at secondary school, pupil voice was all too often a chance just to criticize your least favorite teachers. And I think generally the views have moved on from that slightly, that people are generally seeing it now as a really positive way, and children are enjoying having that influence and that impact, and it is really important. So we've got a great set of resources in the pupil voice pack that you can use. Even if you don't wish to actually follow that format yourselves, they're great. They can all be adapted. You can take those, adapt them for your own setting. Everything in there is editable, and a whole range of different resources that you can use. And they're a great way to start you off, because if you don't already have some plans for pupil voice integrated in what you do, that's a really essential part of a subject leader file that you need to be thinking about. If you haven't already made plans for it this term, that you do think, okay, when am I going to fit that in? And you do have as part of your medium long-term plan when you're going to look at pupil voice in each year group, so that you do have a chance to do that. That can be really useful. So I'm quite interested in that. Michelle, you've obviously mentioned about pupil voice, but in general, do all subject areas have an opportunity for pupil voice in your school? Is this something that all subject areas would have a pupil voice questionnaire or survey or those sorts of things? Or are you kind of tied in, fixed to anything in particular? Okay, so pupil voice twice a year, staff voice annually. Is that just for languages, Dawn, or is that generally in your school as a whole of what they're doing? That's what's quite interesting, is to think, it's the same as if, we put out questionnaires to other teachers. It's a case of, oh my gosh, we filled in so many questionnaires, and you've got to be mindful that if you're asking for pupil voice in languages, and then the history subject leaders are also asking, and so's the English, and so's the handwriting, and suddenly the children have done, a week's worth of pupil voice, it's trying to manage that, really. And fitting those in, which is why it's really helpful to have it in your plans, so that is there, and it can, you can ensure that you're not crossing, with anything else that's going on in your school. And just on that note, does anyone have any really helpful feedback that they've had from any pupil voice, something that's really helped them inform their practice? Sometimes, it's always these kind of comments on any social media accounts for teachers that share these kind of things that always are really great. The amusing things that pupils have said, or, often they'll just comment on your clothes or whatever, won't they? But, have you had any really valuable advice? Has anybody had any great inputs into that they've had really helpful? Okay, so it's encouraged for each subject, trying to do a quick one with 2 to 3 pupils. So that's another idea as well, isn't it? To have just a shorter pupil voice with fewer pupils on a more regular basis. That can be really helpful. And then a bigger one for all once a year, staff voice and parent questionnaires as well. That's really helpful. That's really good to know. And I think what's really useful to know with parent voice is, what support there is for language learning. What background do parents have themselves? Can they speak any languages, or what languages are spoken at home? And that's the most important thing, I think, as well, isn't it, for generating languages, is to ensure that you know what resources are there language wise in your school, and in terms of anyone's there. But if you do have anything amazing that you've picked up from a pupil voice questionnaire, do share it. We always love these anecdotes. They're brilliant. So another thing to bear in mind, and this is when you're putting your folder together, and just in terms of your general planning and your general practice and all of these sorts of things, is that we always have hanging over us the threat of a deep dive or an inspection, or some sort of observation. And it can feel that we're kind of on this uphill kind of slog constantly to get towards one of these, whereas really we want to be at a stage that actually our practice and what we're doing is effective, and anyone could come in at any point and see that snapshot. But it's making sure that we are ready for that point by answering these questions, really. And these are the sorts of questions that you want to revisit, whether you're with your team or whether it's just you teaching the languages or with class teachers. It can be really helpful, and it may well be that you can share this with other foundation non-core teachers, subject leaders, because you can work together to kind of help yourselves with these. That's fantastic. So Dawn's completed a monitoring and action plan over the year. Children, so they learn better from iPad activities. That's interesting. And suggestions for topics. That's interesting. Okay. At that point in the year. Okay, that's interesting. Really interesting. How do you mean at that point in the year? As in at that particular point when, okay, I'll go through the bullet points that I've got here. So really, I want you to think about, what do you want children to be able to do in languages by the time they have left your school? So that's having, as I've said, determining those kind of progress benchmarks that you are looking for, that will be individual to your school and your cohort and the time that is available for you within languages. And then demonstrating that that is worked into your curriculum by evidencing that progression and the plans for progression, and some degree of formative or summative assessment to evidence that progression. Those are all the things that you're working toward. So at that point in the year, so essentially what I mean by that is, so if somebody came in to your lesson next week, could you tell them why you're studying that now and where you've come? It's basically where you've come from and where you're going to next, rather than necessarily, I don't necessarily mean why am I studying sport in autumn or why am I learning food in February. It's more just at the point of when you're being asked, can you talk through what that unit is, what the point of that unit is, and essentially, rather than at that point in the year, why it slots into the curriculum there at that time. Why is it delivered here in the curriculum? Because it builds on where we've come from before, and it leads us on to the next point. So it's kind of, to that really, rather than it being a specific point in the year, more at that point in your curriculum. What is there a rationale behind your order here? And it may well be that it's just a case of building progression, that it is effectively looking at taking students from A to B. And are you regularly revisiting and adapting your scheme of work? And obviously, in an ideal world, it's like anything, isn't it? We'd have time to do this constantly, and the chances of revisiting this on a regular basis can be really tricky with everything else we're juggling, particularly with those of you with your packed timetables, your other subject commitments. But it is something that, whether it's in a language meeting or a team meeting, that you do, ask for time in an inset day to be able to adapt that scheme of work, or to work with teachers, even just half an hour as part of that inset, just to actually check in with other teachers and see, okay, did that work? That was too much. That topic was too big. We didn't finish it. It's down to those sorts of things, rather than having to go for anything major. It's not beating yourself up about the fact that you didn't manage to teach 50 in school subjects. You only managed to taught 6. It's not about the quantity of those sorts of things. It's about the quality of the skills. So if you sort of look at it and think, oh my gosh, it was too much to do school subjects and opinions on school subjects and talk about rooms in the school all in that one term, next time we're just going to cut that out there and leave it as an option if anyone gets to it. It's just revisiting for those kind of things, really, to reflect on what went well. And if you think, oh, I really wish I'd had more time to do that, or as Dawn has mentioned, children really enjoy iPad activities, you might think, okay, well, I'd rather stop and spend a bit more time just revising and retrieving, and actually just playing some games rather than sort of marching onwards as well. That's really important. And just ensuring that pupils are constantly revisiting and consolidating their learning. As I've said, we talked about that in loads of detail in our session on retrieval, practice and assessment. Other questions to think about are supporting pupils with SEND, with language learning. And obviously an issue that is often come across is the fact that many pupils are withdrawn from language learning to, for other intervention strategies that may be taking place, and they end up missing their language lessons. And that's obviously something that then is a decision sort of taken above your head, but it's establishing as a subject leader whether you are going to be held accountable by your senior leaders for those pupils still making or evidencing some progress in a language, even though they're not attending all the lessons. So that's something within a policy that I think it's really important to address. Also thinking about any more able linguists, particularly if you have any children who, if you're learning French and you've got someone who's has a parent who's French or has lived in France, for example, what can you do to stretch and challenge those children? Supporting teachers in your school in general, particularly if they're non-specialists. And what are your plans for developing, the subject in the future? What would you like to see happening? Absolutely. Don't say you've got some French speakers who are high achievers but need support. Absolutely. This is really, really common with native speakers. And this is what I want to look at in our TeachMeet session on deep dives and inspections, which will be later on in our program. We will be going into this in much, much more detail. So, this at this point is just to get you reflecting on those questions that you would need to incorporate in your file as a subject leader. And this in itself is too vast a topic to slot in here, but we will obviously be revisiting that and adding to our CPD provision on that too. And also about CPD or support that you need to do your job. And that's why I feel really, really strongly about running these sessions, because I know how difficult CPD is to come across. I know how hard it is to fit it in. And I know how hard it is to evidence that and to actually inform your practice. And so much of CPD that's available is targeting secondary school teachers who already have a degree in modern foreign languages, who are already well versed in different language pedagogy because they've done a languages PGCE. We need subject support for teachers who don't have a PGCE in languages, who are teaching and leading a language in primary school and themselves may not have a language background. And I think you're amazing. And I'm so inspired by so many of you who just embrace it and go for it, even though you don't have that background in it yourselves. And I genuinely don't think secondary teachers realize this and realize the work that has to go in order to be able to deliver a subject in which you may not yourself be an expert, which is why I feel really strongly about these sessions and running them on a regular basis, but also about developing our CPD provision to support you as well. So we've got a growing CPD collection. Matt shared the link to our main kind of page. And within that, we've got a range of videos. I've just got some examples here. We've got a range from French pronunciation and French grammar to more in-depth videos, which are a bit longer, on SEND in primary languages, or adaptive teaching, which is a longer one. We've got a longer video again on strategies for SEND in primary languages. And within, we've got videos in under 5 minutes, videos in under 10, and then a couple of longer ones under 20 minutes. Within that, my view is to really help you skill up. We're doing the research for you to help you with your practice. So we will, in those, share with you the documents that you would need to know, to be aware of, in order to be able to improve your provision and all of those sorts of things, and effectively to ensure that you are delivering languages to the best of your ability and supporting all aspects of the curriculum. So our provision is growing constantly. And really, I've got a couple of questions in the feedback form that Matt will be sending out later. And really, we would love to have your input in that, because this is a very reactive set of resources. If somebody gets in touch with us and says, we really need some CPD on this, then we will go away and research that and put that together for you. And that's something we believe really strongly about. The TeachMeet program was put together for the year based on feedback that we had from our very first one, which was quite a general session. And from that feedback and from those topics, we set up an entire TeachMeet program for the year. And obviously then next year we'll have a different program again. And alongside that, we have the CPD. So that is something that I do feel really strongly about, because I just feel, CPD is often very expensive, it's time consuming, it requires a lot of time over your day, whereas these videos, they're on demand, you can fit them in quickly, you can even watch them together with a colleague in a department meeting, and then you've had some CPD input that is hopefully going to inform your practice and improve things in your school. Something else that I feel massively passionate about is championing languages in general. And I think that's about, our resources at Twinkl are all about championing languages. Matt's sharing with you some free taster packs. If you're not already a Twinkl member, these resources are free for you to take away and use and have a look at. And they're great for starting to think about different sorts of resources and how we can support you. And one thing we're amazing at Twinkl is our display, and we love a vibrant and engaging learning environment is super important, not just in us being engaging, but also in everything around us. So whether that's having French or Spanish words around the school, having great display and posters, a language notice board, all of those sorts of things, but generally being infused and starting to embed it in what you're doing. Involving all your staff, I think that's really important. So it's an ambitious plan, and I think it's really important to set yourself a really ambitious aspiration. It may not be one that you can do immediately, but over the course of the next 3 years, I want every teacher in my school to be taking the register in Spanish or in a different language at least once a week, or I want everybody to be doing this. And then that's part of your own performance management and your own development and all of those sorts of things, that you yourself then would be delivering that CPD to the staff on how they can improve that. And that's you growing within your role too. Celebrating whole school events is something that's brilliant. Whether you put together, you get some language ambassadors, or your school council, and they are presenting in an assembly for you, or whether you feel not everybody likes to do an assembly, but whether you feel you could deliver an assembly yourself, or you feel that you could get children to deliver that assembly, and you support that assembly, and that's fantastic. Celebrating cultural diversity in your school, whether that is celebrating different food, celebrating music, culture, finding opportunities to celebrate this is super important. Promoting cross-curricular links. So particularly if you're a subject leader for another subject, that's something that comes quite naturally, because you're always looking for links, because it's going to save you time in your own practice. But you really want to think, okay, so in a PE lesson, we could be doing our countdown, at the end of an activity in French, or we could be pointing to parts of the body in Spanish, or it's finding opportunities. If we're looking at geography, we could be learning the name for that country in Spanish, and we could be learning a little bit more about that culture, which embeds into the cultural element of languages too. And in an ideal world, beginning familiarization in EYFS Key Stage 1. Obviously, we'd all love it if we had a fixed slot and we could all deliver languages for half an hour a week, every week from, nursery onwards. Amazing. The reality of that, sadly, is some schools are lucky enough to be able to do that, but not many. But in an ideal world, familiarization at Key Stage 1 or EYFS is where you want to go with this, which can be songs, it can be posters, it can be visuals, it can be the events around the school. It's having a little French club, that's going in. It's having your language ambassadors from your year 5 and 6 class going to help out in nursery and just perhaps, teaching them some words. It's those sorts of things. And just starting to really promote languages, which I think is super important. And these are some of my favorite events, which I think are awesome for promoting languages, really. And the most important one of all is European Day of Languages, which has just gone. It is the best day in the year for celebrating languages. I know it's supposed to be about European languages, but I like it to be about all languages. It is the best opportunity for children to bring in food from a different culture, to listen to music from a different language, to look at a TV program from a different language, to learn about all of the languages spoken in your school. If you didn't do something for European Day of Languages this year, this is one I strongly recommend you plan for next year. Here at Twinkl, I started planning for European Day of Languages in January. So it's something that I would suggest by the end of this term, the start of 2024, you should be starting to plan for next September's European Day of Languages, whether that is a series of events and what you can be doing. And we've got an amazing selection of resources on that. There are a couple of great interim kind of smaller events, which are great ways to get your confidence up, whether that's with an assembly or testing out how that might work. And these PowerPoints are perfect assemblies in their own right. So you can deliver them, or you could get a team of children to deliver them. International Mother Language Day on the 21st of February is an event that really, it wasn't very well known a few years ago, and it's getting more and more popular. Brilliant to celebrate home languages, to celebrate all the languages spoken that children might have come across, whether that's through family members, through friends, through neighbors, or especially if they've got any different cultural backgrounds where they're speaking any other language, then that's an amazing chance to celebrate all of that. So we have a great collection of displays there, and that's a brilliant one to really get the profile of languages, and it's really fun for younger children too. See Dawn's comments there that you've made contact with a local infant school and year 2 pupils are being introduced to French. So that's super exciting. I love to hear that. Europe Day on the 9th of May. Again, it's like almost, I treat that a little bit like a mini European Day of Languages. It's a great one just to get people thinking a little bit beyond about other countries and the languages that they speak. And a super event is the World Day for Cultural Diversity. The actual full title is Cultural Diversity, I think, of Dialogue and Development. So it's a much bigger title and it's there, but generally speaking, it's about celebrating cultural diversity, which I think as a language subject lead is a critical part of the role. So, those are the 4 main events of the calendar that I would always plan around, and I would always have those in. European Day of Languages is the biggie. The other ones are your training events to get ready for that. So if you didn't do anything special across the whole school to celebrate European Day of Languages this year, plan for it for next year. And in the meantime, aim for your next one of the 21st of February for International Mother Language Day to get going on that. We've got a TeachMeet on cultural capital coming up soon, and in that I'll be going over these in much more detail and talking about how you can really promote all of these and how you can boost that throughout the school. So cultural capital, which is and Pete, who's here with us tonight, actually wrote a blog on cultural capital for us and is putting together some CPD materials on cultural capital, which we'll be sharing with you in that TeachMeet. So that's something to really think about. So I would get these dates in your calendar as a subject leader if you don't already. And then just some top tips that fantastic, seen there. Croissants for breakfast, made Eiffel Towers, absolutely. We have loads of brilliant craft resources and all sorts of things. It doesn't always have to be about learning vocabulary. Sometimes it's just about experiencing other things. Craft is a brilliant way to do that as well. And that way it can be, arts and crafts for that week, all being themed along those sorts of things is fantastic. I worked with our craft department on some brilliant craft resources this year. Obviously, I didn't make those, but we talked about how language learning could be supported through the craft materials. And we had flags, there was an Eiffel Tower, all sorts of great different things that could be made. So, we've got loads of links to all of those sorts of things. We've got some top tips here for subject leads that we've just gathered from some experienced subject leads within the foundation phase. And really, it's just about taking that time to, if you can, talk to the previous subject leader, think about some next steps, not rushing things and doing too much too quickly. Focus, on what's most important, go in small steps. So, plan for European Day of Languages next year. That's got to be the biggie. And then the small steps would be the other key events in the meantime. Looking at an element of culture study in every year group. So obviously many of you said that languages often disappear off the curriculum when other things are happening, but there's always room for cultural study and having a global dimension. So can this be worked in? You may not be able to get them to learning language vocabulary or grammar, but you have got that responsibility as a subject lead to be taking children towards that learning about the world and learning about other cultures, which is also part of the curriculum. So that is much easier to embed sometimes when you can't fit in the language learning, particularly then because it doesn't always have to be about something that a specialist is delivering. It could well be that you could get some resources together and the teacher delivers that for you, that it could be about doing a project on the country, for example. Think about your actions, think about impact on learning. And, if you're struggling for time, think about that and find out how you can get more support. And I'm hoping that, once we've had a few of these sessions, that we are going to set up a kind of network meeting, or we'll have that chance to network and you can meet to share ideas and actually look at that, how it goes. We wanted to start today by just, inviting you to contribute more in the chat. And then our next one of these, we'll look at perhaps having some breakout rooms if we did those earlier. I don't think anybody wants breakout rooms at 7 o'clock at night, but perhaps earlier in the day, if you're still in school, that may well be something that we look at, and a chance to have a chat and actually meet face to face and discuss some of the things that are worrying you and how we can support you with that, really. But, not to worry about trying to do it all in one go. Like I've said, plan for European Day of Languages next September. You've got just over a year to get yourself ready for that. Look at how you can build up to that, taking those small steps to really boost the profile, how you can do it. In the short steps, printing off some display, making up a display wall for French or Spanish or German or whatever it might be, putting that together and, thinking, right, okay, next term, I'd really love it to be that other teachers could take a register for me in French or Spanish, if that's what you're teaching, and just to encourage that to happen once a week and to ask for some time in a staff meeting to share that. Those would be amazing steps to make to start promoting languages in your school. And if you've got any other tips that you'd like to share, particularly for any new leads in subject languages, then do please share those in the chat. We've absolutely loved your contributions this evening. That's been really helpful. I've also got some questions. Matt shared with you the feedback on this evening, as well as feedback on this session. I appreciate it's a real whistle-stop tour about putting together a subject leadership. I could fill a whole day with how you could become a more confident subject leader and what you could do. But this is just, hopefully with the resources that we've put together for you to help get you ready and help you plan for that and how you can get all of that together. We have got a language TeachMeet coming up every month, so we have got one of these all the time. You do get sent out the recordings, but obviously you get a mug if you come live, so it's much more of an incentive to turn up. And really, this is a program that we are adding to constantly and refining. As I said, I devised the program based on the feedback that we had. So the feedback that I had from the last TeachMeet was wanting it to be more interactive. So we've got more questions in here today. It's very much that we're listening to you and what you need, because this isn't about me talking to you about what I think you need. This is about me trying to support you with what you need to feel more confident in your job. And if there's something that we can do within our roles at Twinkl to support that, then that is what we're here for. We want to support you as much as we can and to help you teach languages to the best of your ability. So if you have any suggestions for any CPD materials that you'd like to see, if you have any suggestions for any packs that would be really helpful for you, or any adaptations to your resources, then do get in touch with us, because we do make resources to support teachers and we are constantly evaluating this provision. So there is a chance for you in that questionnaire to write in there and to actually say, this is what we'd like to see. So if there is CPD that you need or a short video that you'd like, please let me know. Similarly, I've made videos of different lengths because I want to see initially what's useful. Do you prefer to have a longer video that you can listen to, or would you prefer to have lots of several short burst videos? Please let us know, because this is designed to help you and support you with what you need. So if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat and we'll be answering those now. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Really grateful for you coming out on this time of term when everyone is absolutely exhausted. And I really hope that this is super helpful for you. And more than anything else, just helps you feel a lot more confident about your role as language teachers and the fact that there is support available, and more importantly that you do listen. If there's something that you feel that you need, then you let us know, because we can act on that and we do work on that. So that's it from me.